3 minutes after 10 is the time. I like this new habit that's developed. Possibly it's because we're now available on WhatsApp. But there's some funny comments arriving in the studio before I've even drawn breath. Alan is up first. He says, I can't believe you just called the cabinet a talent puddle. Surely it's more of a talent damp patch. I quite like that. And Matt reminds us, I presume that this is in response to Andrea Leadsom speaking earlier. So now the House of Lords have joined the ranks of the enemies of the British people. Oddly, it's people with poor mental health or anxiety that are being added to the list of enemies of British people today by another member of Rishi Sunak's government. I refer to a sad article which appears under the headline, Mental Health Culture Has Gone Too Far, which is such a stupid thing to say. I mean, he may not have written the headline, but he's been speaking to the Daily Telegraph. This is the Work and Pension Secretary, someone called Mel Stride, who, if he walked into the room right now, I'd probably wonder where my tea was. I mean, if he walked into the room, if you showed me a photograph of him now, I wouldn't know him from Adam, but that is the nature of the dog days of any administration. Isn't it? If you suffer from anxiety, if you suffer from poor mental health, then it's the Work and Pension Secretary who's dedicated his dubious talents this morning to making you feel even worse and making you feel even more anxious and making you feel even less likely to be able to get it together and hit the road this morning. He claims that normal anxieties of life are being labelled as illnesses. And there is a sort of growing narrative that this is going to be the Tories' response to a problem, is to deny that the problem exists. What has happened in the last few months is actually extraordinary. Things that aren't really massive problems or things that could be fixed, they haven't fixed. For example, the asylum system, which they have, I think, quite possibly deliberately made immeasurably worse so that they can somehow cast themselves as the people best qualified to fix it. And then, because they're as incompetent as they are dishonest, fail to fix it to the point where this Rwanda story now, even if you're racist, I bet you're bored of the Rwanda story, aren't you? Is there a phone in there? Are you a racist who's bored with the Rwanda story? Give me a call on 0345 6060 973. So, and then the problems that they can't fix or won't fix, they just deny exist. They deny that they're problems at all. And that, I think, is what they're doing with the adult equivalent of something that we touched on yesterday. Thanks to David, who has added to the list of amusing comments coming in before it's even 10 past 10. I wouldn't know him if he fell in my soup, is the Scottish phrase for a person like Mel Stride. I wouldn't know him if he fell in my soup. I like that. But listen, we have to, because we're grown-ups, we have to engage with the possibility that he has at least half a point. 150,000 people are currently signed off work with mild conditions, and he is going to force them, encourage them, help them to look for a job. And we need to begin, I suppose, by wondering how plausible the existence of these people is, and then what kind of help they most need. So what I want you to tell me is really what happens or why you're not working. Listen, the problem I've got is believing that people are really going to choose a life of indolence for the sake of £390 a month on top of some of the most basic welfare payouts in the civilized world, and you are removed from the requirement to prepare for a return to work. In all the years that I've been doing this job, that one of the things I found hardest to understand is the determination. And sometimes I get bored, by the way, of having always to use phrases like right-wing. But it is always right-wing people who are absolutely determined that everybody else is on the skive or on the lam. You get these mad moments where the fraudulence is revealed in all its disgusting glory. For example, people who don't believe in poverty but do believe that parents who might struggle to find a few extra quid to pay their school fees are victims of a terrible discriminatory conspiracy. I don't know how bent you need to be to care not a jot for for people who can't feed their children, but to somehow crusade as a champion of people who claim they may not be able to continue to send their children to incredibly privileged schools. That is just a moral dimension that I lack the capacity to understand. And it goes hand in hand with this belief that anybody who is in receipt of help is somehow dishonest or is somehow lying. Here is a person who needs help. And I think part of the problem, the single most ridiculous contributor to public discourse, and my God, that's a crowded field, is a bloke who writes for the Daily Telegraph called Alistair Heath. The headlines on his articles, I swear to God, you have to double check they're real because you think they've been generated by a sort of parody AI. And these people need to believe that they have risen to positions of prominence through merit and talent, and they haven't. It ties back to private school. The privilege is extraordinary. It's probably something we'll touch on when we get onto the Garrick Club in a moment, but in an hour or so. But the idea that if you have benefited from extraordinary privilege and done all right, you have to persuade yourself that it's a consequence of your talents. I think a corollary of that is the belief that people who have struggled and people who are struggling and people who need help, then they are there through their own fault as well. I know this sounds a little bit unthought through, but I think it's true. I try to understand the mindset of people whose opinions I find repellent. And I make no apology. I'm sure they're lovely people in many, many ways, but these particular opinions I find repellent. Taking aim at people who suffer with anxiety to a point where they feel they can't work. Presuming that if you can find one person swinging the lead, that's evidence that everybody is. That position is so repellent. I try and dig into the psychology of it. And all I can ever come up with is that these profoundly mediocre people who have benefited from a country built on deference and privilege have somehow developed a twin necessity to persuade themselves, A, that they've ended up in the cabinet because they're talented. Jonathan Gullis must look in the mirror and think that he is in the House of Commons as a consequence of God-given talents, as opposed to the complete corruption of our politics undertaken by Brexit and Boris Johnson. It's madness to think that these people stroll around Westminster feeling like masters of the universe. But if you have to convince, so deep down in your belly, you know that you are not very bright, not very talented, you don't understand things, you're not very good at much, you've risen without trace because nobody really wants to go into the Conservative Party anymore, so frankly a gerbil could probably get a job in the cabinet. Nadine Dorries can be Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. So somewhere inside the reality festers, the knowledge, the days of high office being held by gargantuan talents like Ken Clarke, those days are decades behind us. The absolute flotsam and jetsam that populates the cabinet now has to put immense amounts of effort into persuading themselves that they're not flotsam and jetsam. And if you've persuaded yourself that you are talented, you are a beneficiary of a meritocracy, you have risen through gifts as opposed to dumb luck and patronage and privilege, then I think you also have to develop a kind of contempt for people who've fallen through the cracks. You can never admit to yourself that but for the grace of God, you'd be signed off work with anxiety. But you're not, because you've risen without trace due to dumb luck, patronage and privilege. And that, I think, is part of the problem I have with these stories. So this Stride character says, as a culture, we seem to have forgotten that work is good for mental health. Who's forgotten that work is good for mental health? Put your hands up if you've forgotten that work is good for your mental health. That activity, that getting out and about is good for your mental health. Please, hands up now. Anyone who's... This man is the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. The most senior political position in the country when it comes to matters of employment. And he's talking through his bottom. It's just gibberish. But presumably the Daily Telegraph have convinced him that there's a crowd that wants to hear this bilge. While I'm grateful to today's much more open approach to mental health, there is a danger that this has gone too far. What's gone too far? You absolute polo. What's gone too far? Caring, treating, diagnosing. recognising, describing, accommodating. I'll tell you the problem with mental health in this country, Mel Stride. It hasn't gone anywhere near far enough, because the effort that is needed to actually improve people's existences, to look after them, to help them get back into the quotidian existence which would make them feel better, is non-existent. And guess whose job it is? Guess whose job it is to fix that stuff? Yeah, it's your job, you prune. It's literally your job to create a society in which people suffering from anxiety stop suffering from anxiety. And you're trying to create a society in which people suffering from anxiety get told to pull their socks up, toughen up, and it's all gone too far. I didn't realise I was as angry about that as I am, and I don't know why, because I have really nothing in this game, no skin in this game at all, except you, except the messages I have received and the calls I have taken over 20 years from people who are sick to the eye teeth of being told that they've chosen to be in the state of unhappiness that they find themselves in, that they've chosen to be in the state of vulnerability, that they've somehow signed up to be unhappy, to be anxious, to be depressed. They've opted for it, given like a chocolate box of lifestyle choices. They've elected this one. You show me an anxious person that doesn't want to be better, and I'll show you probably a liar. It's coming up to 10:15. So, what's it like? What's it like? What's it like to go to the doctors? Well, here's what he claims, all right? You go to the doctors and you say, I'm feeling a bit down. And the doctor, in 94% of occasions, will sign you off work. This is what the Work and Pension Secretary is claiming. So you go and see the doctor. You're not even asking to be signed off work. You're just hoping that he might be able to give you some advice, possibly some medication, some sort of therapy, or refer you for some treatment. But guess what? He can't. She can't refer you for that because the NHS has been brought to its knees by 14 years of austerity. So you go to the doctor hoping for some help. Tories have taken away the doctor's ability to give you anything like the help that you might need. And instead, in some cases, they might sign you off work. In which case, Mel Stride pops up and goes, well, that's not good enough. You should be going to work. Doesn't think to address the failures that the NHS has had thrust upon it. It doesn't think to actually make announcements about fixing the poor provision for mental health. The fact that you can barely get a referral unless you're actively suicidal. The fact that you can't actually see anybody who might be able to provide you with the therapy that you need. The fact that unless you can afford to pay for it privately, you can't even get close to the sort of experiences and treatments that will help you get back to work. No. None of that. Not doing any of that. We're just going to start hitting you over the head with newspaper headlines and ludicrous speeches, casting you as chancers and liars and cheats. So tell me what you really are. 0345 60 60 973. Some people's work can, of course, be the cause of their anxiety, the cause of their mental health. I was reading a very, very poignant thread the other evening from someone I know outside of social media describing the almost impossible task of keeping his bosses happy. Just one of those employers who seems to revel in diminishing and belittling staff. And somehow Mel Stride thinks that going to work for someone like that is easy for people who suffer from anxiety or preferable from not going to work for. So I just find the disconnect between observable reality and political rhetoric sometimes. I'm almost relieved that I'm still honest enough to feel genuine fury at this stuff. And do you know what the worst thing about this is? You do, actually. You might not remember, but you do know what the worst thing about this is. The worst thing about this is I told you it was going to happen. The worst thing about this is that I told you when they'd absolutely ballsed up Brexit and they'd lost the ability to blame everything on immigration, they'd have to find somebody new to scapegoat for the failures that they've inflicted on the country. They'd have to find some new victims of austerity to blame for the consequences of austerity. And here it is. And here it is. If you want to address the high levels of anxiety and mental health conditions in this country, you need to treat people and look after them. You do not need to tell them that mental health culture has gone too far. You do not need to tell them that they must pull their socks up and stiffen their sinews and get themselves back into the environments that they temporarily find unbearable. If you want to address the epidemic of mental health problems that have been caused in large part by the state of our society, then you have to set about improving the state of our society. And guess whose job that is? I'll give you a clue, it's not mine. Why do you think these vampires queue up to complain and claim that we need a smaller state? Why? How can you possibly claim that we need a smaller state when you're acknowledging the existence of hundreds of thousands of people who desperately need more help? Well, the answer to that question is simple. You acknowledge the existence of hundreds of thousands of people who desperately need more help by claiming that they don't need more help, that they're getting too much help already. And it's just disgusting. And it's taken me, what time did we come on? 3 minutes past? It's taken me 16 minutes to dismantle this disgusting rhetoric with absolute ease. Absolute ease. So why doesn't anybody else bother trying to do so? Answer, because they don't care about you. They don't care. They don't want to believe you. They don't care whether or not you've got anxiety. They don't care about the reality of your existence. They could just, if you've only got 2 gears, you've got forward and reverse. That's it. They're the only gears you've got. So here is somebody I don't really understand, so I'm going to attack them. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to call right now if you are part of the mental health culture that Mel Stride has gone too far. Tell him and tell me the reality of your existence. And can we look at the idea that if you turn up at the doctor's looking for help, then 94% of the time you'll just be signed off work and sent home. It's 10:19. I missed this as well. Emma points out they asked to be in charge. All of these people asked to be in charge. She writes, your anger isn't surprising. This is an accumulated frustration with continued, repeated, malicious incompetence from those who actually asked to be in charge. And instead of visionary improvement, we get asset strip tutting from Mel Stride. Who is he? Why the hell does he have the authority to tell us not to react to the decline of our living standards and the wrecking of our children's futures? He's been in the role, according to Wikipedia, since the 25th of October 2022. What's he been doing? Playing tiddlywinks? I don't know. But he has decided that the problem in this country is that people with mental health problems have gone too far. Madness. Rich is in Leamington Spa. Rich, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, I may not come across as very lucid. It was the conversation you're having. I'm actually in that situation at the moment. I've been down with depression and bipolar anxiety all my life. It's not a choice. I don't get... You know, in every walk of life, you'll have some people take the mickey, but it's not a choice. My life's ruined by it. You can't make friends. You're rubbish at relationships. Everything. It's just the most horrible thing. People don't know how to cope with you. They will try. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's lovely, but
sure.
But when they're like relationships, you can't keep one. It's impossible. I'm nearly 60.
Yeah.
You know, and it's. I don't understand I don't know how to put it, James. I think...
Well, you're putting it really well, Rich, actually. You're putting it really well. Let me tell you how he puts it. Let me remind you how Mel Stride puts it. He says there is a real risk now that we are labelling the normal ups and downs of human life as medical conditions, which then actually serve to hold people back and ultimately drive up the benefit bill. So what's happening here, according to him, Rich, with you, is that by recognising your problems, we're making everything worse.
Well, I'll be honest with you, if you don't mind hanging on a sec, but I think it must be 10, 11 years ago, I had a proper breakdown. I've been on all my life, but if it wasn't for the services and everything, I wouldn't have made it. My family had to have my 24-hour watch. And then before, I think, I've had ups and downs since, but people, you get into a relationship and it goes well, but when you're on your high, you're happy. But it ruins your life. I haven't been able to work for 5 months. I'm self-employed, and I won't sign on because I'm thinking I'll be okay next week. But my credit card's there.
What does that mean? Talk me through that phrase that you're not able to work. Because I don't think that the Work and Pension Secretary understands what that means. To be honest.
Sorry. going to work,
Yeah.
I love my job. I'm very lucky in the fact that I love my job.
Sure.
Yeah, I love getting up for it. But sometimes, I went to meet my friend just after Christmas because I've only got a very small circle of friends because a lot of people give up because you're not there when you say, or because I had to give up drinking 8-9 years ago because it got that bad and I was hiding behind alcohol. So your circle of friends, and to walk out of my front door, meet my best friend who I have no issues with. He's lovely, absolutely lovely. Took me 30 minutes, stood in front of my door, wondering whether I wanted to go out that door. I wasn't going to anywhere dangerous. I wasn't going anywhere scary. I just couldn't force myself to get out that door. And I'm lucky he's the sort of chap that understood.
I see what you mean. He'd wait for you, and that's how you feel on a work day now. You just can't. I
can get to work, but because I'm so anxious, I'm shaking all the time. My nerves are shot.
And do you get any help?
Well, this is a thing, see, and I mean this respectfully, because I think, all these doctors and everything try to do the best thing that they can. They genuinely do.
Sure.
But I don't think you'd ever understand it unless you're in it. I truly, truly believe that. They can give you medication. I've had medication. And I'm not joking. Some of it works.
Some of it works and some of it doesn't.
Yeah, please don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking it.
I know
but it's like the medication may work for a bit, but it doesn't help because sometimes it sends you into a zombie state.
And finally, briefly, if you can, because there's a lot of people waiting. I've really enjoyed.
Of course.
I've really enjoyed listening to you, Rich. I really have. It's important that people hear your voice. But when you hear Mel Stride's voice on a day like today, when you see, and I suppose I'm the messenger on this, so that's my bad. A headline like "Mental health culture has gone too far. Everyday anxiety is not a medical condition," says Minister in crackdown on worklessness. How does that make you feel?
I think, I'll be really honest with you, I think what they're doing, with this, I'm quite into the politics, but with this government, they're just looking at anybody to be that the right wing will like, because at the moment they're trying to get right wing vote because reform's coming, and they're just trying to hit the people down. They're not mentioning people with money, they never do.
Just be meaner and meaner and meaner.
Well, basically, if they say, they're taking your money, you're paying for them to be off, they don't realise that most of the people that are doing this, we don't want to be off. We don't want to be like this. We want a life.
That's the myth, isn't it? That's the great myth. And you find someone. I was one of the big surprises when I started doing this job was how easy it was to get a call from someone who knew someone who knew someone whose window cleaner was married to someone who'd bought a dog off someone who went to Ibiza every weekend on their income support. There's always somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who is absolutely swinging the lead. And I'm sure there are people swinging the lead, but this determination to believe that the existence of one lead swinger makes Rich a liar, makes everybody else waiting to talk to me a liar, makes everybody listening a liar, everybody suffering a liar. You find one liar and everybody's a liar. Except in the Tory party, where you find one liar and you make him leader. You make him Prime Minister. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So anybody who is claiming that their anxiety prevents them from being able to work is swinging the lead. But Boris Johnson can send Jacob Rees-Mogg to lie to the Queen about the unlawful prorogation of Parliament, and Mel Stride's there waving his little Boris Johnson flag. It's bizarre. It's almost as if they don't have any morality whatsoever. And of course, if you've got no morality but some intelligence, you can still be an effective politician. If you've got some morality but no intelligence, you can still be an effective politician. But if you've got no morality and no intelligence, well, then you're almost certainly in the cabinet. It's 10:30. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 10:34. A special message for Christina. I'll try to be less amusing. She writes, I sneakily listen to James at work, and that last, they're almost certainly in the cabinet, has just made me roar with laughter at my desk, and I can't get caught out. I'm already the only Irish lefty in the office. Sorry, all right, I'll try to give fairer warning. We're talking about Mel Stride. We're talking about his insistence that mental health culture has gone too far. We're not sure he could explain even what that means, to be honest, although it was probably something along the lines of too many people are getting help for their mental health and we need to stop them from being looked after and get them back to work. Listen to this. This is really interesting. I had the same attitude as Mel Stride, writes Vicky, until a few years ago when my son was assaulted and had a traumatic brain injury. Then my parents died. I was diagnosed with PTSD. The anxiety was crippling me. I had to give up my sales job because my performance was dipping. There was no kindness from work, just targets, performance reviews, ever more KPIs. Work is a cruel place these days, thanks to the Tories. Not cruel enough, according to Mel Stride. And JH asked, does he want to swap places with me? My life has been plagued with chronic anxiety, complex PTSD from childhood, excessive bullying at school and at home, harassment at various points in my life. I'd be happy to stop barricading myself in my studio flat and swap places with Mel Stride. And Michael wants to know what the hell would happen if people like the ones who've been contacting me today had to go and fight in a war. Mate, you're just an idiot. I don't understand, frankly, how you can function. I don't understand how you can get your fingers to type a message into a phone when you clearly only have about 8 spare brain cells. To answer your question, people suffering from the kind of conditions that we're talking about here today would have been shot by their own side in a war, certainly in the First World War. They'd have been shot by their own side if they couldn't cope with the mental exertions, the mental stresses. And if you knew anything about that practice, then you'd be hanging your head in shame at the moment. And speaking of hanging your head in shame, let me tell you something else that's linked to the military and is linked to the news at the moment. You heard that Andrea Leadsom in the news is disgusted by Labour peers who voted against the amendments, or rather voted for amendments to the Rwanda bill last night. Do you want to know what one of them is? One of the things Andrea Leadsom is disgusted by. 248 people in the House of Lords last night voted for Amendment H1, which would mean that if you have assisted British troops in the past, then you can't be deported to Rwanda to have your asylum application processed. Yeah, if you've risked your life in Kabul, for example, or Kandahar, if you've risked your life to help British troops in foreign engagements, in perhaps in your own country, then 248 members of the House of Lords felt that you should be exempted from these deportation flights, and you should be afforded the right to have your asylum application processed in this country. You've helped British troops. That was one of the amendments. Did you know that? That's what Andrea Leadsom is disgusted by. People trying to stop translators who've helped British troops from being deported to Rwanda to have their application processed in a country from which, even if it's successful, they will never return. That's what she's disgusted by. Do you know what else she's disgusted by? 251 members of the House of Lords who voted to exempt proven victims of modern slavery from deportation to Rwanda. She's disgusted by people who don't think that victims of modern slavery should be deported to Rwanda, never to return. She's disgusted by people who don't think that translators and aides to British forces should be deported to Rwanda, never to return, even if their applications are completely kosher. That's what she's disgusted by. You think I exaggerate when I talk about the absence of talent, integrity, and even the vaguest semblance of morality from this crop of cabinet. I'm not exaggerating. Tony's in Aldershot to steer us back to mental health culture. Tony, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello,
How
Tony.
are you?
I'm exercised this morning, Tony, but otherwise well, thank you. How are you?
I must admit, when your previous caller, Rich, I was in tears because I've suffered with mental health for 20-odd years. 53. Right. I'll do a quick background. I got bullied at work when I nearly lost my son. And I had a mental breakdown and I was bullied at work. So I had to leave work after trying to unalive myself. I have an assistance dog who goes with me everywhere, 24 hours a day. I cannot go to a shop. I cannot go to the doctors without having an anxiety or panic attack. I cannot speak to anybody new in person because it's just too hard. It's difficult to say. It's just so hard. And what your previous caller said, I have about 4 friends that understand me and are patient with me. I have lost lots of friends due to my anxiety. I cannot go out socially. I have not had a relationship for the past 10 years. And they're saying,
Well, I'll tell you what they're saying. I'll tell you what he's saying. He's saying you've convinced yourself that you have some kind of serious mental health condition as opposed to the normal anxieties of life.
And I wish I did. I wish I could go to work, James. I really do. But the thought And even now, I'm shaking, even thinking about it. I'm on so much medication. I am one of the lucky ones. I have a fantastic GP. I have a fantastic mental health practitioner in my GP surgery, who I see every week.
So you're quite lucky in one way.
Yeah, I'm very lucky, and I thank my stars I have that. But you know, some people think that I'm sitting here that I don't want to go to work. If I could get out my front door and go into an office and face people on a daily basis, I would do that. But I can't. I physically. Even now, I'm so sorry.
Don't apologise to me.
It's just even the thought. I have probably about 6 panic attacks in a day.
Where does, you must be even more baffled than I am by the idea that Mel Stride is trying to propagate, that you are taking the mickey, or maybe you're one of the very few that he'd say, oh no, I don't mean Tony, I don't mean her, I just mean all the other ones are swinging the lead. But of course you hear these headlines, you hear these announcements from very, very senior politicians, and you think they are talking about you.
I think the trouble is, and I'm not a political person, I must admit, I cannot stand this government because there are people who are struggling to pay their mortgage. They are struggling to put food on the table. They have, they are still people going to food banks. And he's saying, well, people are going to get signed off by the doctor. Excuse me, but the struggles that people and stress that people are going through just to be able to live.
Well, it's always underpinned by these two things. The first is that it's somehow a lifestyle choice, that you're living the life of Riley, you're rolling in it, you're having a grand old time. This is what you would choose to do in a perfect universe. Would you choose to be living the life that you're living, or would you choose to be better? He thinks you're choosing this. And then the other thing is that if you are one of the people that he thinks has a genuine condition, then he doesn't mean you. So we're back to Brexit and bloody immigration. Oh, I don't mean you. No, you can start. I don't mean you. When I try and whip up the public against everybody in your boat, I don't actually mean you. I just mean everybody else in the same boat, everybody else who fits under the same headline, everybody else in the same category. Ah, dear. So on a day like today, I'm not really helping, am I, by talking about this stuff?
I think the thing is, with mental health, it is still a stigma.
Yes.
Around mental health. There is a small percentage that do take the mickey.
There must be. There must be everywhere. I don't know any, but there must be. There is everywhere.
Yeah. But the stigma still, and I fight drastically for. I am very open and honest with my mental health and everything, and I'm not proud that I hate having this, I have to take tablets every day. And if I don't take those tablets, I go into crisis. There's no, I will be on tablets for the rest of my life.
I'm sorry. And you, if it helps, and I hope it does, you reach people when you talk to me in this manner that wouldn't be reached in other ways. I don't know whether Mel Stride is capable of being reached, to be honest with you, because it would demand a combination of conscience and sensitivity that seem to be disqualifying factors from membership of Rishi Sunak's government. But there'll be lots and lots and lots of other people having their minds changed as you speak. And one of the most effective ways I have found over the years, and I suspect, Tony, that you'll appreciate this, is just a very simple reminder that mental health and physical health are two sides of the same coin. So, as Emma reminds us, perhaps Mel Stride would like to explain how you could continue being financially productive after being hit by a car or while being racked by pneumonia. If it was a physical condition that was preventing people from doing something, would he claim that physical health culture has gone too far? Too many everyday injuries, like broken legs, are preventing people from working as Olympic sprinters? I don't know. Maybe he would. But there is this is why Tony uses the word stigma. You talk about mental health, and partly because of our history of valuing stiff upper lips, valuing repression over reality, valuing denial over honesty, partly because of that, and partly because of a whole heap of other reasons, mental health still gets looked at askance by people like the Work and Pension Secretary. Whereas, of course, if he wanted to help these people back into the workplace, he'd be coming at the problem from precisely the opposite direction. sympathy, compassion, concern, as opposed to criticism, condemnation, castigation. It's 10:45. It's 10 to 11. Mystery hour at 12 today. I mentioned that because we manage usually to bring a little bit of joy into each other's lives. But no guarantees, but we may be in need of it by 12 o'clock today. I saw some astonishing polling yesterday. I can't remember whether I mentioned it to you, but the percentage of under 35s who are minded to vote Tory at the next election or ever, I suppose. But I think the polling by Delta Poll looks specifically under 35s minded to vote Tory at the next election. What would you reckon that number was? I mean, genuinely, if you know that I was shocked by it, right? So it's going to be shocking. But what would you put on that now? And remember, this is under 35s, not under 25s. The notion that people are always left-wing in their youth and then they become riddled with cynicism and callousness as they get older and lurch ever further to the right, I hold some water, but this is under 35s. What percentage of under 35s do you think are minded to support the Tories? I'll tell you, the Lib Dems and the Greens are on the same very, very low number. But what do you think the Tories are on? It's extraordinary, actually. Don't let me forget to tell you. Back to Mel Stride's conviction that mental health has gone too far. Too easy. I tell you what, he thinks it's a really cushy old life, being signed off work with mental health problems. Thinks that you're doing it because the alternative is too grim. And I just wonder whether or not you recognise that description of your own existence. Simon is in Hartlepool. Simon, what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm back at work now after being off, so I've kind of come over the other side a little bit in that regard.
Well done.
But the whole statement, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it just feeds into this whole: if one person is found swinging the lead, then you're all guilty, and it brings shame on people who have experienced this, because straight away then when that statement comes out, people will look at it and they'll think, that's me. Am I exaggerating? Am I swinging the lead? And when I was off last year, there's no way I could have worked. My work was fantastic, and I have been fantastic, but it was a really, really difficult time, and I ended up being a temp. I ended up in a psychiatric unit. Managed to, kept trying to go back to work because, of course, you're on statutory sick pay, which ain't going to cover anything.
Well, just talk us through that, because Mel Stride makes it sound like a lottery win.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, I tried my feet up. It was fantastic, yeah. No, because of, obviously, I got a little pay, but then obviously you go on statutory sick pay, and then you end up struggling. Then you get behind. I'm behind on mortgage, loan repayments, water, tax, council tax. All that is in arrears that I'm trying to fight back now. I'm back at work. But
and in a sense, you're one of the... for people in your position, you're lucky insofar as your employer was both accommodating, understanding and patient. I'll read you something that came in just before you came on. This is from Florian, who says, my last 5 years in the fire brigade, I worked alongside a middle manager who oversaw staff who were off sick with mental health issues. They once said, I don't understand mental health. I've never had any mental health issues. I can't decide if it exists.
I mean, prior to the incident, and obviously that everything tipping, I consider myself a fairly resilient person. I've never been off sick in my entire life, and I'm 53. Yeah. And so I consider myself a fairly resilient person. But then when a set of circumstances hit you that you can't foresee, and you end up struggling, at that point you feel like you actually physically cannot work. You cannot be in that job at that point. And I tried going back, but I realised, I felt not pressure to go back, but I felt like it would do me good. Yeah. It would do me good if I get back and I'm doing something, but it didn't. And I tried a few times. It was too early. Well, eventually,
it's funny, isn't it? You hear me say that the going back to work is, of course, it's good. You're resilient. We're all resilient until we're not.
Yeah.
And working and going back to work is good for your mental health until it isn't. I mean, this stuff isn't rocket science, is it? Of course, you're healthier when you're at work than when you're not. But the reason why you're not at work is because you're not healthy.
You're not healthy. Yeah, and I think that's where I fell into a trap of almost I assumed life. As long as I can get back to work, then I'm going to be okay. And it wasn't the case.
Because you make it worse. You're compounding stress with guilt. And you've used the word shame already in a slightly different context. But it is shaming to think, I can't do this. What's wrong with me? And you've got to stop pushing until you get to a place where you don't need to push and you can get back into the workplace.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm back at full time. I've been back at full time since the middle of November.
Fantastic.
And I've kind of still going through stuff, obviously, and working on stuff.
Of
but,
course you
know, definitely come through the other side of it.
You're the poster boy. What did you get? You got help, you got support, you had an understanding employer, you got some help from the state, although it wasn't enough, and it probably compounded some of the problems that would have increased. You mentioned that you're still having to sort of pay your way back from arrears in various areas. So the help you got you back to work. But if I was Mel Stride, I'd be thinking, how can we help more people? How could we have helped you more? How could we possibly have got you back quicker? Or even perhaps got you back without having this backlog of debt, which you're now going to have to work towards, because debt can be one of the most stressful factors in anybody's life at the best of times.
Yeah, I mean, it compounded it, and I did feel an internal pressure to get back to work because I couldn't afford to be off. And
that's the worst. That's the most pernicious element of this rhetoric, isn't it? That you're minted when you sign on. You're minted when you're getting your £390 a month on top of your basic welfare payouts or whatever statutory sick pay. Simon, thank you. Just briefly, I know you've used the word shame, but a headline like this, mental health culture has gone too far. You mentioned it makes you think that he's talking about you. What about the idea that some of the less generous or open-minded people around you also think that this is about you? Does that come into your reasoning at all? Does that notion of stigmatization? He's almost trying to stigmatize you.
I think in my case, no, because work and my friends at work were aware of what had gone on and the attempt, etc. So they knew this wasn't just. Yeah. They didn't look at me and think that guy's swinging at us. He's pulling a fast one or whatever.
Just lucky you didn't work with Mel Stride, aren't you?
No, I mean I work in mental health, so it's and I see clients every day, and it's so I've got a kind of a two different perspectives on it, really. Working with people who are struggling and then having struggled myself.
Well, at least that means the people around you are going to recognise the reality of it when they see it. Simon, thank you, and good luck as well, mate. 10:57 is the time. John's in Chippenham. John, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, John.
Yeah, I actually called. I've just been speaking to your producer, who is absolutely lovely, I have to say.
Really?
And hoped I might be able to sort of give some.
Well, you take your time, mate. Take your time.
Thank you. Because I'm not doing so well today.
Okay.
Might be able to give some insight into the thinking and mentality of Mel Stride, and explained it would be helpful to have a bit of background. I was just trying to get something onto the radio because I can't message using my thing. Okay. Anyway, basically, so I was a veteran, and I used to be a pilot in the Air Force.
Okay.
And I've been to Afghanistan, to Iraq, served in the Gulf. And I would say you have to have quite a bit about you to get through those. Have to have a reasonable constitution, and I've sort of suffered some toughness.
Yes.
That's not the case anymore. I know, I would consider myself to have had a reasonably granite-like constitution, and that can just evaporate overnight. So to your contributor who was saying about what would these people do if they had to go to war, I can tell you, it's quite possible to do all of that and end up in the situation that most of your other callers have so wonderfully articulated earlier on today.
Yes.
And I think one of the points that I would say is that the experience I have now, I would probably say that years and years ago, when I was a much younger man, and I think this might be something you can relate to, I was probably on the right of sort of slightly right of centre of political ground.
Yeah.
And so I have that kind of understanding, and it was probably maybe similar to you. It was therapy after sort of things started to go wrong.
Just to be clear, I was never right-wing. I benefited enormously from therapy for a whole heap of reasons. Well, I was only right-wing in the sense that I thought you could stiff upper lip your way out of trouble, and that if you
okay. And I'm not saying I was right-wing either. I'm just saying that
that's what we mean in this context.
You sort of tougher mindset. I think you talk about obesity was your thing that you regret now, isn't it?
Yeah, one of them.
And sort of I was a fitness fanatic. I thought anybody could sort of do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So, and it was there therapy. What the point was, the most important point of this is that, over a long, long period of time, with a lot of help from a lot of people, things have come out. That I'm autistic, didn't get diagnosed till I was 47.
Right.
I've got CPTSD. And the one thing that I realised is how emotionally closed off I was to so much.
Gosh. And
those two things combined, I think I was certainly lacking what I would call an intuitive empathy towards other people.
I understand.
And I was also perhaps not interested enough to develop what I call a functional empathy, which is where it doesn't necessarily occur naturally to you, but with the application of a bit of thought and thinking and trying to understand other people, which I see you do day in, day so well. Yeah. I'm like you said recently, you've been discussing race. And, it's almost impossible for somebody who hasn't grown up black to understand what it is like to live with that every day. But once you expose yourself to enough of those experiences, you maybe can start to get a semblance of it. And it's that effort you need to put in. And I think what's happened with Mel Stride, which is the point of the call, it's that fundamental lack of empathy. And it's about the willingness to try and, even if you don't have an absence of interest
in understanding what other people's lives are like.
Yeah.
Also, you're being very generous.
Culture and everything.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And also then the idea that anybody in the situation that is under discussion here must be a different version of me. And I've never had these problems, therefore these problems are probably not completely real, and that means that the people describing the problems or claiming the problems will be fibbing in some cases or getting too much help.
Through the lens of their own experience.
I'm having that line, John. I'm late for the news, John. I hope you feel you've had a fair crack of the whip. I didn't want to curtail you earlier, but the world only exists through the lens of their own experience. If that doesn't sum up the current generation of government, and I do not know what will. Top man, John. Stay safe. It's 11:01. It's 5 minutes after 11. A lot of love for all of the callers in the last hour, and we are going to move on to something much less serious because that's life. And I promise you we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this at least every time people like Mel Stride chuck their ludicrous comments into the mix. And you have to talk about it when people like... Normally, he'd just be on his own, drinking in the corner of the pub. But he's work and pension secretary. Do you know what? The bit we should have picked up on more was this line here. If they go to the doctor and say, I'm feeling rather down and bluesy, the doctor will give them on average about 7 minutes, and then on 94% of occasions they will be signed off as not fit to carry out any work whatsoever. Who the fudge goes to the doctor and says, I'm feeling a bit down and bluesy? John puts it best. He says, nobody, James, nobody goes to the doctor saying they're feeling a bit down. You go to the doctor when your mental state is so bad that you can't function normally. You go because you're desperate. Mel Stride lacks the mental capacity to understand mental health. That's a really good point. And where that 94% figure comes from, God only knows. Go to the doctor because I'm feeling a bit down. Hello, doctor, I'm feeling a bit down. Have you tried to get an appointment at a GP recently? Just going to pop in on the way home, are you? Just tell him you're feeling a bit down. Or does he think... Anyway, on we go. So I'm going to talk to you next about the Garrick Club. But I do think it's an important conversation, even though initially... the travails of a club in the West End of London to which women are not allowed to belong may seem relatively trivial. So one of the commentators, it may have been Amelia Gentleman actually, not a commentator, a journalist who has knocked the lid off this story, opened it up for me in a way that no one had managed to do before. And it was simply this. If you were in court, perhaps as a woman, let us say, in fact, I think you have to be a woman for this to work. If you were in court and it was, for example, a sexual harassment case or some form of discrimination, and you found out that the judge was a member of the Garrick Club, could you be confident of getting a fair trial? Now, that's not to say that being a member of the Garrick Club makes you incapable of understanding the dangers of discrimination or indeed of sexual harassment. But if you are a member of a club which women are not allowed to join, would you be a fair and trustworthy arbiter of a case of sexual discrimination in court? That question right there blew the doors off this for me, made me think about it in a completely different way. And then the news side of the story exploded because two people resigned including Simon Case, who Mel Stride must presumably have a massive problem with, because he took quite a lot of time off work, didn't he, right in the middle of the COVID inquiry that he was absolutely central to for reasons that were, I think, linked to mental health. My apologies if it was something else, but either way, he's back at work now, and he is still Cabinet Secretary and is now believed to have quit the Garrick Club, having spent most of last week defending it, on the relatively ludicrous premise that he only joined it so that he could actually effect change from within. Why have you joined a club that doesn't let women join? Well, I'm going to try and change it into a club that does let women join. Oh, but you've joined it. Yeah? How else am I going to change it? But by joining it, you perpetuate it, and you show support for it, and you pay subscriptions to it. So by joining it, you prolong it. No, by joining it, I intend to bring about its destruction from within. That's why I've joined it. So then why have you resigned? These people, honestly, these people, they're just extraordinary. Also, the head of MI6 apparently resigned after a row about all-male membership. Now, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but if you're thinking of texting me or ringing me to say, what about the WI? Then you're probably listening to the wrong radio programme, all right? If you honestly think that in a patriarchal society of entrenched inherited privilege, in a country where crimes against women are neither investigated nor prosecuted with anything like the rigour that they should be, in a country where within my lifetime it was still impossible to rape your own wife in British law, if you don't understand the nature of inequality between men and women, then you're the kind of person that might ring this radio programme and suggest that the Women's Institute is a comparable institution to the Garrick Club. But you would be on the wrong show, all right? Just to be 100% clear about that. Similarly, if you're thinking of using the phrase, it's political correctness gone mad, then you are listening to, well, no, you're listening to the right programme, but you just need to sit down and be quiet and pay more attention to what other people are saying, okay? 10 minutes after 11 is the time. Because there's a letter in the Telegraph that I want to read to you. And then I want you to tell the person that wrote it essentially whether he's right or wrong, or why he's right or wrong. I am a member of the Garrick Club. My wife approves, and she is a guest. I don't know why I'm doing this voice, but I think it's probably accurate. I am a member of the Garrick Club. I am a member of the Garrick Club. My wife approves, and she is a guest there on a regular basis. I have to give you a quick heads up. At some point in the next 5 minutes, I am going to have to say something along the lines of some of my best friends are members of the Garrick Club. Maybe not best, and maybe not that. One good friend of mine, at least one good friend of mine, is a member of the Garrick Club, and I have luncheoned. Is that the correct verb, Keith? You know about these things. I've luncheoned there. I have luncheoned at the Garrick Club. I am a member of the Garrick Club. My wife approves, and she is a guest there on a regular basis. There is a spirited debate going on as to whether we should admit lady members. I am not in favour. Many other members disagree with me, but so far we have not fallen out and are unlikely to do so. I wonder why the rest of the world is so keen to resolve this matter for us. What has happened to the old principle of live and let live? Watch with interest by all means, but please let us resolve the matter in our own way and in our own good time. Now, I don't think you would be absolutely scunnered to discover that 10 years ago I probably would have thought he had a point. I wouldn't have felt that this was an urgent case. But 10 years later, I've got a problem. 10 years later, I don't want to go anywhere where my wife's not welcome. And I don't mean that in a soppy way. And I'm not really the kind of chap who feels comfortable describing how he is actually a feminist. I mean, I am. I try to be in most ways. And I'm not looking at it through the eyes of all women. I don't know whether this makes me a bit silly or soppy or selfish, but I can't be a member of somewhere that my wife's not welcome. This is very convenient because she could go for lunch with the same friend that I've been with, so I don't have to worry about it. But I couldn't be a member of a club where my wife wasn't welcome because of sexual inequality, because of the history of sexual inequality. And that's why the idea of an institution that I wouldn't be allowed to join but she would is not in any way comparable to this. The place is full of High Court judges. Literally full of High Court judges. It's full of newspaper editors. It's full of incredibly influential people. And every single one of them, if they are a member, is a man. There's a joke there, isn't there? That to be a member, you need a member. But that is not something that a woman can apply for. She cannot become a member of the Garrick Club. And I don't want to be a member of somewhere that wouldn't accept my wife. I mean, this has got me into trouble socially on occasions. I don't want to get into a deep religious discussion, but I can't go for dinner. I can't accept an invitation to dinner from somebody I sat next to at a function who I find fascinating and really interesting and important, but he's not. His religion doesn't permit him to sit next to another woman that he's not married to. So I can't go for dinner. I can't go and sit in a chair that my wife is not permitted to sit in. I can't do it. I won't do it. It's not a big thing. I don't cut these people out of my life. I don't excise them or condemn them or criticise them. I don't even, a bit like the fellow who's written the letter to the Telegraph, I don't even think it's necessarily my job to wriggle out what's right and what's wrong about this. But I cannot join a club of which my wife is not permitted to join, any more than I can sit in a chair that my wife is not allowed to sit in. Because I'm a man. Not because of sexual apartheid as such, but because of the history, because of all the things that I could do 50 years ago that my wife couldn't do, because of all of the privileges that my gender bestowed upon me throughout history that were not bestowed upon her. So, for example, you couldn't get credit as a woman as recently as the 1970s unless you had a male guarantor. It didn't matter how much money you had in the bank, you couldn't get a loan or a mortgage unless you had a male guarantor. Yeah, if you got married in the 17th century, your name became Goodwife. If you married me in the 17th century, you would immediately have become Goodwife O'Brien. That would have been your name, not Mrs. or just Goodwife. Goodwife O'Brien. I could have got you punished for being a nag. I could have had a scold's bridle attached to you. The epic inequality, which we only really started chipping away at the beginning of the 20th century, is still baked into so much of our society. Think about the simple things. Think about jobs. Think about the blithe way in which, and guilty as charged, the blithe way in which we still presume that childcare and house care responsibilities are largely going to fall to the woman, even if she's got a full-time job just like the bloke has. There's so much going on here that is more important than the original story suggests. And that's what I'd like to talk about. Because I could be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. But I think that's what it comes down to. Why would you want to be the member of any institution where your own wife wasn't welcome? 0345 6060 973. Perhaps you're a better feminist than I am, a more intellectual feminist. You've got a deeper understanding of these issues. I try. You know I try. But I don't. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't all get there. Talk me through it. Talk me through it. Talk me through the inappropriateness in 2024 of a club that counts the king, a deputy prime minister, and some of the most powerful men in the world, some of whom I really admire, some of whom I really like, some of whom I know socially, some of whom have hosted me there for lunch without me really giving a second thought to the fact that women weren't allowed to be members. But something about the way this story has been developed, the way this story has been written, the way this story has unfolded. My thanks to Mo, who points out I could have sold Mrs. O'Brien a few years ago. I did. Well, certainly daughters as well, and dowries, and absolute removal of the denial of agency. Have a look at what the tradwife movement in America stands for. That's where this stuff comes from. Deep down, that's where its roots are. But on the other hand, it is 2024, and enormous amounts of progress have been made, and all of the things that I've just described no longer exist. So is this actually the point at which you can say, well, it's not really doing any harm, is it? So what on earth is that guy on the radio talking about the 17th century for? Or even the 1970s? We don't live in the 17th century. We don't live in the 1970s. And the Garrick Club, a male-only membership, may be a relic of a bygone era, but the bad things about that bygone era don't exist anymore. So what's the harm? What's the problem? I almost had a nod of sympathy with Ben Wallace, who was on with Nick earlier, when Nick asked him about this. And I'm going to play you what he actually said, and then I'm going to play you what it sounded like to me. All right? So here is what he actually said.
I just wish people would all be left alone. Right? If a whole lot of men want to get together and have a club, it's up to them.
And here's what I actually heard.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.
If you know, you know. I can't explain that second. If you get it, you've just enjoyed that moment of radio more than perhaps any other this week. If you don't get it, you think I've gone even madder than usual. So there's the tension, right? That's the topic. That's the conversation. I think this is wrong because of the long legacy of sexual discrimination and the long legacy of base inequality between men and women that this society has both championed and engendered. But almost all of the examples I give you, to me as a man in 2024, sound anachronistic and outdated. So, the question becomes, what's the problem with a male-only membership club? Women can go, by the way, as guests. I've made that clear throughout this conversation. What is I want you to tell me what the problem is, all right? And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What is the problem in 2024 with a club for the most influential and powerful people in the country that only admits male members? It's 11:20. What do you think this is referring to? I give up. You're hopeless at this. No, don't say that. Not the whole radio show. That was a bit unkind. I give up. You're hopeless at these hooks and teasers. You're not wrong there. I've got a little toy now, don't you? This is, there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, this is my toy. So you put that on there. And then I say, what percentage of under 35s do you think are minded to vote Tory at the next election? And I take it off and I put it in front of me, which means that I'll look down at some point and I'll go, I must remember to deliver the conclusion to that inquiry. And I will say to you, 7%. 7% of under 35s. It goes to the Labour figure. Shall I do another hook and tease or shall I tell you the Labour figure now? What would you prefer? Hi YouTubers, by the way. Don't forget to ring that bell and subscribe. 70% Labour, under 35s. I think we could be, and I know everyone's very cautious, we could be upon the edge of epochal change to UK politics at the moment. Partly because, and this is a conversation that so few people are ready to have yet, but partly because the Conservative Party has reached critical mass. Either you think that all of the country's problems can be solved by being even more racist, in which case there are parties to the right of you, or you realise that all of the country's problems have been caused by you, in which case you're stuck in the Tory party. Everybody else, and if you're under 35, apparently this is even clearer, 70% Labour, 7% Tory. So, the Garrick Club, male-only membership in 2024. I can see all sorts of problems with it, but are they problems born of history rather than modernity? Sal's in Paddington. Sal, what would you like to say? Hello, Sal.
That's certainly my take on it. Do you know when the last women's-only club was founded in London?
No.
2018.
Yes. But that's not
called the Albright after Madeleine Albright.
Yeah.
Now,
hang on. Why does that matter? Why is that relevant?
Because although I agree that the Garrick Club was born out of basically the historic patriarchal way that all clubs were. This includes like the Oxford and Cambridge Club, which began associate memberships for women where they only had one ladies' room, which was basically a big tea room, and became sort of fully integrated in about the mid-90s, I think.
Yes.
And
don't get distracted. Why do you think that the Albright Club is comparable to the Garrick Club? Because to me, it seems pretty obvious why they're not remotely similar.
Well, because one has organically grown out of a patriarchal society and is still. It's not as though women are banned from the premises. So we're not talking about. I don't think today.
No, but the Albright Club, the Albright Club would be dedicated to ensuring that more women get into the kind of jobs that men who are members of the Garrick Club already have. So that one is a protector of historic privilege and one is a challenge to historic privilege. So they couldn't be more different.
But that argument would be... That argument presupposes that is the intention of a social club, which I would argue is not necessarily the case. It's a case of basically.
And why do they have membership
have
criteria then? Why do they have membership? Why do they have membership criteria then? Why do people get blackballed?
But that also happens in life with friendship circles.
Well,
I don't mean a formal election.
It doesn't really. You can't have a friendship circle that bans women.
No, I certainly don't. But.
No. I think let's park the Albright Club because I don't think that's not as helpful as you thought it was, and focus instead on the anachronism element of it. That bit.
Absolutely.
So there is a defence here that says, the days of not being able to get a mortgage or the days of becoming a chattel upon the point of marriage, those are long behind us. Therefore, this is just a little bit of harmless... Well, yeah, but except that, I think the more I think about the kind of jobs that these men have and the much, much, much lower representation of women in similar positions, the more I wonder whether this sustains that inequality even in the modern day.
Then you get into a cause and effect. Is it because they are inviting their friends and their friends are in those jobs and therefore, they...
Yes.
So, yes. But there's also the fact that I don't think that the reasons that people join are actually because of misogyny. I think it's because it's a prestigious club.
You're the first person to use the word misogyny. I sense, and I don't want to misrepresent you, that you kind of feel that it's okay, but you can't fully articulate why in the context of protecting privilege, which is why the Albright Club actually has been more help to me than to you. Because if you want to see more women on the High Court bench, if you want to see more women editing newspapers, if you want to see more women running MI6, holding down incredibly important jobs, being cabinet secretary or deputy. I mean, you know that there are women. These are not unbreachable bastions, but they're still very, very, very male-weighted. Then a club where all of these men who've already got a much, much higher chance of getting into these kind of positions can all hang out with each other and women aren't allowed to join seems to me to be more problematic than it was before you started talking, Sal. But that's not your fault. It's coming up to 11:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to join anywhere that wouldn't let my wife join. That seems to me to be not only quite a romantic approach, but also quite a feminist one. And it wouldn't be the same if it was the other way around, because Mrs. O'Brien might want to join somewhere that is dedicated to propelling more women into positions of prominence. And why would I mean, I might agree with the cause, but if they wanted to have a forum where men didn't contribute, because let's be honest, we'd all probably try and dominate the conversation and start manspreading all over the place and mansplaining. So you want to have an environment in which you can guard against those practices and those phenomena. It seems to me to be a completely different proposition from the opposite, which is the male-only membership. It's 11:30. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 34 minutes after 11. I think this encapsulates something, but I can't quite articulate what it is. So the Daily Mail carries a piece today that says, the resignation of Simon Case, our most senior civil servant, and Sir Richard Moore, head of MI6, in reaction to the publication of the Garrick Club's membership list is absurd and worrying. And they go on to suggest that the Russians and the Chinese must be laughing themselves silly because Case and Moore have behaved in such a wimpish fashion. But the writer keeps his identity secret. It's published under the byline, an anonymous Garrick Club member. So someone so cowardly, craven and pathetic that he can't even put his own name to his opinions is accusing two men who have resigned from the club after seeing how it looks from the outside of being wimpish. So that's part of the reason why you might not want to be a member of the Garrick Club, because it encourages a level of arrogance and entitlement that means you think that you get to claim to be the tough guy while writing anonymously in the Daily Mail. I hadn't even clocked how stupid that is. No one on the paper has clocked how stupid. Who's going to write the article about why these two men who've resigned are the wimps? Oh, I'm not writing it. I'm not bloody putting my name on that. Are you mad? Well, what if you do it anonymously? Write about how the other people are wimps, but do it anonymously. Can you see a problem? Can anyone else see a problem with this? We can't write an article about how the head of MI6 is a wimp anonymously while claiming that we're tough. Anyway, various problems. And why did they resign? Because I don't think it ever occurred to them before how it looks from the outside. The head of the civil service and the head of MI6 telling all of their underlings, telling everyone in MI6 and everyone in the civil service that it's okay for the boys to keep everything. Yeah, it's okay for us. It's a funny one, isn't it? The email that the head of MI6 sent to members is worth repetition. I'll share that with you shortly, but let's get back to the phones in the meantime. Rebecca is in Warwick. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Hello there, James. Nice to speak to you again. I would like to wonder if I could work there. Serving men food and drink for money.
I don't actually know, to be honest. I presume so. I mean, it's a zinger in the sense that it's okay. Women can come and polish our shoes and serve our martinis, but they can't actually join our club.
Well, I could walk through the door as a servant to men, paid with money, etc.
Yes.
But I can't walk through that door as an equal, unless, of course, I've got a man who's a member. So all round, this is pretty offensive, to be honest. It's archaic, and that's a kind word. Because ultimately, as a woman, I can't be a member as an equal, but I can serve you.
Yeah. That's timeless, right? It doesn't matter how much progress has been made from the days of dowries and chattelage. There is still an epic discrimination in place there.
There is. I mean, if you're going to have a men-only environment, I mean, obviously we don't know for certain, if this is the case, but surely your servants should be men-only as well. Unless, of course, there is.
They may be. I've only been there once, Rebecca, and it's highly unlikely after this hour I'll be going back anytime soon. But certainly that's my membership up the kibosh, isn't it? I think I'll probably almost certainly get blackballed now. But I can't remember whether. I think there were. I think there were women staff there, and that does send an incredible message out.
Because I actually feel like you would have noticed if there weren't.
I think you're probably right.
It would stand out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you must be right. That's why I'm fairly confident there are someone else listening will know. And there it is. I mean, in a nutshell. So how these two men in particular, the head of the civil service and the head of MI6, could have not realised how obnoxious it was is a question for the ages. There's there is an extraordinary saga here. Richard Moore, the head of MI6, sent a letter to staff. I mean, to be fair, I've almost got some sympathy for the coward in the Mail who hasn't even got the guts to put his name to his own article. But the head of MI6 sent a letter to staff explaining that he had tried to resign last year. He tried to resign last year when the controversy over the club's women's problem surfaced once again, but he'd been persuaded by its chair to stay until a new vote on the matter. So I tried to resign, darling, but I just couldn't. I mean, it's a bit like when Withnail and I went on holiday by mistake, isn't it? I tried to. I'm in the club by mistake. I've joined the club, but I've not resigned. Although there's some sense there that if he was determined to vote for women members, that's a fig leaf as well, isn't it? I'm a member of a male-only club, but I voted for women to be allowed in. They're not allowed in, and I'm still a member. Riddle me that. He is understood to have admitted to staff at MI6 that his membership of the club was a bone of contention even within his own family. So this is Rebecca's point and my point. But he's still in it. And he had made a commitment to colleagues that he would not use the club socially until the ban on female members was lifted. I think it's quite cheap to stay there. I think the rates are quite preferential if you need a bed for the night. And then, a couple of days later, he resigned. The email did not satisfy his colleagues. His decision to resign is understood to have come after several discussions with an internal group known as Women in the Secret Intelligence Service. The issue has clearly been sucking up a lot of time when MI6 might otherwise have been working on what its website cites as the three core aims: stopping terrorism, disrupting the activity of hostile states, and giving the UK a cyber advantage. So he has now gone. Amelia Gentleman has done some extraordinary journalism over the last few years, and all of it comes from a place of principle that's almost absent from every other corner of Fleet Street, it sometimes seems. And here's another example. Caroline's in Leon C. Caroline, what would you like to say? say.
Hi, James.
Hello.
When you started this conversation, you said, "Oh, this is I don't know. You might have not said light-hearted. I don't want to take away from the serious of the previous discussion about mental health." But I'm seeing very much a link and a segue into both of them. They're very much linked.
Yes.
I had to stop myself from calling you on the last one because I'm supposed to be doing things and I couldn't help but stop and talk.
You can't blame it on me. You can't blame me for your inability to focus, Caroline.
It's quite pertinent because I'm in the middle of hoovering.
Okay.
So I'm going to...
well, that's allowed. That's allowed. You're not hoovering at the Garrick Club by any chance, are you? Just to bring Rebecca's call front and centre once again.
Exactly. One of your previous callers on the last conversation, I think it was your last caller, was talking about how the likes of Mel Stry's comments come from a place where they have not thought or had experience outside of their world.
Yes.
How can they appreciate this? My concern, my issue with this type of male club is, and I don't want to feel like I'm generalising, but I can't help but think the people in that club are going to have very similar views. And what sets them apart from other male-only clubs, and I'll give an example in a moment, is that they are in a position of power and influence.
Yeah.
They are making decisions, or they are in a position to make decisions that affect the many. And if those discussions within those places are around and actually talking of someone being wimpish, so actually standing up, strikes right back to the mental health issue. Someone standing up for perhaps what they don't believe, they've walked away, they are called a wimp.
Yeah.
Now, that's the mental health right. I can't help but think that that's how Mel Stry thinks, this kind of patheticness of people, it's awful language. But the point I'm making is if they don't step outside and if it's only this discrete group, how are they ever going to be influenced by anyone else's opinion and thus perpetuate the type of decision-making that goes on?
I like your reasoning. I challenge one thing. I don't think that I don't think you're going to have a very homogenous set of opinions inside the building. Although they would all agree on one thing, and that is the desirability of being a member of a club that doesn't let women in. I'm going to read three names in ascending order.
Yeah. That
I think might challenge your.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with Jeremy Paxman as a member.
Okay.
Has that changed your view at all?
Really?
Okay. Next. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Clive Myrie is a member.
Okay.
Has that changed your view at all?
I think you could give me all the names under the sun.
No, I'm not. You're not getting off without the last one. Here's my zinger.
Okay,
Here's my ace in the hole. You ready?
Yep.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
Is a member.
God, because he's a male actor,
He's a self-proclaimed feminist, according to the commentary, the cowardly commentator in the Daily Mail today.
They're still men, and they still have had a certain... Perhaps it's not about being male or female. Perhaps it's about the likes of who would be allowed into this club. Perhaps we're not talking about men and women. Perhaps this is about something beyond that. The point I was wanting to make as well is I saw something on social media this morning, a local group, a man that was setting up a men's mental health group to come together and chat. Yes. Now, that is totally different. And I kind of thought, wow, what a great idea. And this sits so much apart from this type of
They're two completely different propositions.
It's two completely different. And I might, I didn't want to generalise. And yes, of course, there are going to be people there with different opinions. But the types of groups, and to say, well, leave us alone, let them get on with it. Well, that's probably coming from the people that are allowed in these groups.
Yeah, I think not for the first time. The callers have articulated you, Caroline, and Rebecca and others have articulated this better than I've managed to, because it comes from that place that our final caller of the last hour was talking about, the difference between authentic experience, actually speaking from a position of experience, and then empathy. So I can do empathy. I can imagine what it's like, what it looks like, what it feels like, but I can't be a woman. I can't walk as a woman in this space. And if I did, I suspect I'd be very close to where you are. very close to where you are. I should point out quite a few people are doing that old Groucho Marx quote. So I said I can't be a member of a club that wouldn't accept my wife. Groucho Marx's famous line on this, of course, was I could never be a member of a club that would accept me as a member. That's pretty good as well, actually. I think I could sign up to both of those. I love it when this happens. Two texts came in very close to each other that work perfectly as a pair. The first is from Christopher. He says, is it worth noting that a club of all the powerful is as concerning in and of it by itself without the gender aspect? It's almost a perfect hotbed for conspiracy. Christopher sent that, just as Ben sent this. Wasn't it one of these clubs where Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg had that meeting to try and save a politician? You say a corrupt politician. I don't know that. Well, Owen Paterson had certainly been found to have broken all of the rules very badly, egregious breaches of parliamentary rules. And you're right, they launched the Save Owen Paterson Society in order to try and abolish the rules to get their friend off the hook. That alone to me means that these places should be abolished. To be fair, Ben, they could have met in the back room at Wetherspoons, couldn't they? I mean, there was nothing specific about the venue that speaks to the listen to me. Nothing specific about the venue that speaks to the entitlement and privilege of thinking that you could actually abolish the rules in order to... Of course there is, Ben. Ben and Christopher, top of the class there. What a beautiful combination of text. And also, you give me an opportunity to plug my book. I'd wait for the paperback on April the 25th now. The hardback is still available. But I'm pretty sure that it is actually the Garrett Club. And I know that it's in my book, but I can't remember if it is definitely the Garrett Club. But if you need to know, is it definitely the Garrett? So it's definitely in How They Broke Britain by James O'Brien, the smash hit runaway Sunday Times bestseller. So I should really have made that point myself, Ben. I'd be particularly delighted to know that you know the thing that you just did because you did read my book. But enough about that. I've got another quiz for you, backed by popular demand. Here are two members of the Garrett Club. No, here are two members of society defending the Garrett Club. I want you to try and work out which one is a former member of Rishi Sunak's cabinet and which one is a puppet dog. Okay, so here's clip number one.
I just wish people would all be left alone. Right? If a whole lot of men want to get together and have a club, it's up to them.
And here is clip number two.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
We're just innocent men.
So which one of those is a puppet dog and which one is a former member of Rishi Sunak's cabinet? Answers on a postcard, please. Joe's in Woking. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Jim.
I've been thinking a lot about it. I've been listening to the programmes over the last few days as well. I think Sheila had some people, and even Rachel Johnson was on talking about it yesterday. And there are a few things that they talked, the women who've been to the club talked about, which were quite interesting, that have given me another perspective of how anachronistic I really think this is, because they talked about a lot of women go, apparently, and men take their wives and all those things, but they can't go to the bar, they're not allowed to order a drink, they can't book a table, they're not allowed to book a room. So ultimately what you've got is what looks like a mixed group of men and women, where there's a very clear delineation between who's important and who's got rights in that room and who hasn't. Yeah. And so it kind of, it splits the group, I think, very clearly, and only women who've experienced this will know that. And men won't know this. But there's so many experiences you can have, I've had in business over the years, where you feel like the men are talking to the men right in front of you, and they're not even looking at you, and you're standing there in the group with them. And it's like this second tier. And the hierarchy is that the women, therefore, are invitees, they're guests, they're thereby, someone else's decision, and therefore they've got an inferior status automatically applied to them, and they're on someone's arm. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I
do know what you mean. I think I would have failed to fully appreciate that until you explained it to me. But how do you then think of? Well, because I mean, in a way, and I know this isn't necessarily your intention, but in a way we're sitting in judgment now upon the wives of these men, aren't we, a bit? For how, like, we're almost wondering how on earth can they put up with this?
Well, some people do.
I know, but I'm just checking that's what we're doing. Yeah.
I've got some interesting experiences. I've been to Royal Ascot before, and I've met women whose badge says Mrs. Edward something, and I have to say, what's your name?
because it's not Edward, you know. And I think some of those, as you said, you read out that list. You know, some of the people in the club will be very modern. I've heard over 50% of men actually would like women to be members.
Yeah.
But there are still going to be, and a lot of them are older, like they've said. There's a lot of older, so it's a very anachronistic kind of like, you know, in ancient behaviours. What's that new word, diluvian, I've been learning about before the flood.
Yes.
But you've got some of those older, very powerful men who are likely to be just looking at other men for their opinions, as one of your earlier callers was saying.
I think you're right. You're just as an unquestioning patriarchal hum to the whole thing. I don't know. Listen to this, Joe. I don't know if you did you hear the appearance at the Select Committee?
Oh, are you talking about Helen McNamara?
No, when Liam Byrne was asking questions of I think, was Helen McNamara there? 6 male MPs, 1 female MP at the Select Committee, but I don't think she gets into this clip. But I think this proves your point perfectly, actually. Have a listen to this.
But can you foster a genuine culture of inclusiveness while being a member of an all-male club like the Garrick? Is that a good signal to send to the machine? You get him?
I have to say my position on this one is also clear, is that if you believe profoundly in reform of an institution, by and large it's easier to do if you join it to make the change from within rather than chuck rocks from the outside. And by the way, maths is also part of this. Every one person who leaves who is in favour of fixing this antediluvian position, every one of us that leaves means these institutions don't change. I think when you want reform, you have to participate.
Yeah, here. You wish to declare an interest? Yes. Yes, I do. And I do so.
But as a member of the
Garrick? As a member of the Garrick, yes.
I didn't think it was necessary, but
I'm very sure I speak on behalf of all the public servants who have recently joined the Garrick under the banner of trying to make reform happen.
Yes.
What is the Garrick Club? One day.
Doesn't matter. It's not very important.
Yes, in the context of strategic thinking in government, I'm not sure it's that important.
Exactly.
Reassuring to hear.
That gutsy laughter, or gusty laughter, as Amelia describes it, Amelia Gentleman describes it in The Guardian, is kind of what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, and just like a sense of, I don't know what's wrong here, because this is what we've always done, isn't it? We have good chats as the blokes. And
leave it to us. We don't need to worry the little ladies with this business of state.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 former prime ministers who wouldn't be allowed in. I mean, admittedly, one of them's dead and one of them's crackers. But Theresa May wouldn't be allowed to join the Garrick Club, would she?
No, she wouldn't. But when I was thinking of Helen McNamara, and when you were talking about this, she was at the COVID inquiry saying how she was trying to get,
of course she was,
the Boris and the gang to talk about whether the face mask, or to discuss whether the face mask, the PPI, were going to fit 75% of care workers women, 75% of teachers, 75% of hospital workers, whatever. Just like, and they didn't even get it on the discussion sheet, because what's she on about? She's on about a woman's opinion. So if you're sitting in any conversation in the Garrick and there's this, or in certain parts of the Garrick, I am sure the older, very established, been there for decades, male judges types are not thinking, I wonder what an equal woman to me's opinion might be about a very important point.
This is it. It calcifies the truth. It calcifies the practice. It puts it in aspic. It keeps it there. And the other bit about Helen McNamara is, I'm not talking over you because I'm a man. I'm talking over you because it's nearly the news, and because it was one of the best phone-ins we ever had was because she felt it was about having to apologise in the first line.
Yes.
Wasn't it? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being the annoying woman, whereas a man wouldn't do that in a million years.
No.
A million years. So we won't be meeting there for lunch later then, Joe.
Sorry.
That's okay.
No, I'm sure there'll be many places.
We'll have to go to Nando's. It's coming up to 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dan points out that by Simon Case's logic, the best way to modernise the Ku Klux Klan would be to join it. According to, it's slightly reaching for the sledgehammer there, Dan, but it's a brilliant point. The point as well, of course, that Laura made so brilliantly was in that room with those men. They're sort of backslapping, as Amelia Gentleman says. You can't be entirely sure from the footage, but it looks like that when Robert Buckland came forward there to declare an interest and say that he too was a member of the Garrick Club, it looked as if the man next to him was slapping him on the back affectionately. So, it's not very modern after all. I'll tell you what is modern: Mystery Hour, and it's next.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
Good Lord, is that the time already? 3 minutes after 12 is the time. Switchboard's full, unfortunately. You've got to get in early now. But if you get in too early, you get punished. Because you start clogging up the switchboard for the conversation that we were having before 12 o'clock. But I barely mention it now and things fit. We will move fast. We will move quickly. And free up phone lines, I promise. But if you do want to get involved, you know what to do. There you go, there's one free now. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. This is, if you're new to it, by far the most entertaining hour that we spend together most weeks. It is funny, enlightening, frustrating occasionally, but ultimately deeply, deeply satisfying. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that it achieves a sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. It sounds fairly straightforward. Some people ring in with questions and other people ring in and answer them. But somewhere between those two relatively straightforward sounding phenomena, the magic occurs. Radio alchemy is how I would describe it, actually. Radio alchemy. Or radio gaga, depending on how you're feeling. There's a prize, by the way, for the best contribution of the day, of the week. My favourite contribution is rewarded with a Mystery Hour board game, a magnificent new addition to the James O'Brien merchandise range, which currently includes a Mystery Hour board game and some books. Actually, I suppose do they count? Do books count as merch? If you got the books count as merch, I've got quite a lot of merch now. I've got merch. Anyway, the Mystery Hour board game is quality merch, top quality merch. You can find out more at mysteryhour.co.uk, where you can also buy it. And you can find out more about the terms and conditions of this very grown-up proper radio competition at lbc.co.uk. And there I think it goes. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. Shall we crack on? I think we shall. John's in Farnham. John, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why is it that our moon doesn't have a nice fancy name like all the other moons in the solar system? It's just called the moon.
Well, because it is. That is its name.
Just the name. I mean, you have the moons of Mars are called Phobos and Deimos.
Yes.
The moons of Jupiter, Ganymede, Callisto, plus 92 others.
Nobody likes to show off, John.
Ours is... Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's Wikipedia for you. I just want to know...
Well, because it was the first moon. Because it was the only moon we could see. So they named it. And you know, depending on what ancient civilization you're looking at, I will run with the Romans because I've got the Latin. They looked at it and they said, what are we going to call that? And someone said, Luna. We'll call it Luna. So it became known as the moon. And then when interplanetary observation became more commonplace, well, basically after Copernicus and that lot came up with the old telescopes and they started discovering other stuff in the sky, they realised that, and this would be post-Galileo, of course, given the challenge that he posed to, given the introduction of heliocentrism to our understanding of the solar system, they realised that other planets also were orbited by that body that we've called their own equivalent of moons. So it moved from being the name of that thing in the sky to being the name that is used to describe all things that fulfill similar purposes around other planets. So anything that orbits a planet, ergo, becomes a moon, but there will only ever be one, the moon, none of which takes into account Alfie Moon.
Or Keith.
Or Keith Moon.
That would be a nice name for our moon, wouldn't it? Keith Moon.
We should call it Keith Moon or Button Moon. Yeah. But so that's the answer, isn't it? So because for a long time we could only see one, so it was the moon. And then we realised other planets had moons, so we called them moons.
Okay. It would be nice to give it a nice name, though, in retrospect.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could start a campaign, John. Call it John. John's a nice name.
Yeah.
No?
No. There's too many of us around.
There are a lot of Johns around. I don't know. We call it Rastapopoulos. Rastapopoulos is a nice one. Rastapopoulos. But no, it's too late now, isn't it? It's the moon. Round of applause for me. That's almost certainly the answer, isn't it? It can't be anything else. Yeah, we shall see. Thank you, John. Well played. Christian's in Norwich. Christian, question or answer?
Oh, hi, James. I've got a question.
Oh, yes.
But can I just add... just a comment on your merch conversation.
Of course you can, yes. I don't like to talk about my merch, but you can, yeah, of course you can.
Fair play. I used to run music nights in Norwich back in 99 till 2009, and one of my pieces of merch was a frisbee that I used to print my logo onto, and I'd give them out.
Oh, should we think we should get Mystery Hour Frisbees?
Well, there you go. You heard it here first.
Oh, yeah, it's a good thought. It's not a great phone line, so make it snappy.
Sure. So, I wanted to ask, it's a dog question.
Yes.
My dog can lie under my duvet for hours without coming out for air. But if I go under the duvet, I last about 2 minutes before gasping for oxygen. How can my dog, who, has a different kind of perspiration technique, sit under my duvet for that long without needing oxygen or clear air?
What's your duvet made of?
I don't know, feathers.
What is it? Are you claustrophobic at all?
No.
Because, I can stay under the duvet for longer than you.
Have you tried?
Yeah. I used to do this thing at school where I could lie so flat in the bed and then arrange the duvet on top of it that it looked like no one was in it. I was a bit thinner in those days, and it meant that the prefect who was in charge of getting us all out of bed would leave me alone. And I could stay under the duvet for a long time then.
Okay. Well, my situation is that I'm off work at the minute with a back injury.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I'm getting better. Anyway, and so I'm sleeping downstairs because the sofa is big enough and it's more comfortable than our softer bed, let's say. And the dog's up and down every hour, getting under the duvet and then going up.
Well, I'm not sure that we've stumbled across a scientific phenomenon here, but on the off chance that we have, I'll put it on the board. It's an odd one, isn't it? Why can Christian not last very long under his duvet, but his dog can? And the premise upon which the question is predicated is that the oxygen supply to the brain is somehow different. I don't know. Chris, I'm not going to lie to you, mate, and I know you're a bit poorly and everything. I can't believe you got on with this.
I tried last week and didn't get on last week.
Yeah, well, you could have taken the hint, man.
Yeah, you might remember a question I asked about 2 years ago.
I might not.
About dry and wet volley in tennis, and someone called up and said, no, it's not a dry volley, it's a dry volley.
Yes, I do actually remember that. And here you are, still. There you go, eh? Everybody nature loves an optimist. I certainly love an optimist. Thank you, Christian, I think. Joe's in Warrington. Joe, question or answer?
It's a question, please.
Carry on.
Okay, I'm going back about 40 years to my first sex education class. So I'm going to make you squirm here a bit.
Yep.
The teacher explained to us all about the sperm racing towards the egg. And she said to us, the first sperm to get there penetrates the egg, and then the egg hardens, and then no other sperm can get in.
Right.
And immediately, one of my classmates said, but what if two get there at the same time? And we all laughed. And the teacher said, that never happens. And he said, well, what if it does? And she said, it never happens. And that was it. She wouldn't move on, sort of thing, from that.
But it can happen.
And then, well, I would have thought it can happen.
Oh, no, maybe it can't. I don't know. Go on.
And then about a couple of weeks ago, I was just talking about something else and just reminded me of that conversation. I thought, well, is there somebody out there, a doctor or something, who can say, it can never happen, or if it does happen, this happens, or, you know what I mean?
So, is it true that an egg can never be breached by two sperm, the same egg?
Yeah, because it must take a certain amount of time for it to harden.
That is an excellent question. Sorry.
Very good.
No, it's awful. No, I shouldn't actually have done that. No. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the hardening bit.
Well,
I don't remember much of my sex education, actually, Joe. Would you like to know why?
Because you went to a Catholic school.
Well, no, we had it, but our sex education was given to us by a monk. So it was a man in a dress who'd taken a vow of celibacy, giving us sex education. So the reason I don't remember much of it is that I sat there in a state of philosophical confusion, thinking, how can this be? How can we be getting sex education from a bloke who's taken a vow of celibacy? Yeah. And I know, it doesn't prevent anyone from studying biology, and maybe he was a bit of a raver in his youth, but it seemed odd. Crikey, the story he told us to try and make us too terrified ever to have sex. He told us a story about HIV. I must have shared with you. If I haven't, I will do soon. Joe, thank you. Is that true about that thing with the two sperms and the egg hardening? I don't even remember that. Do you recognise that from sex ed? Maybe they were yanking your chain. Walker's in Nelson. Walker, question or answer?
Hello, James. Question, please.
Carry on, Walker.
serial questioner here.
Yes, I thought so. That's how I knew it was a woman, because it's a rare name.
I just got rid of my first name because I didn't like it.
No, I think I've asked you about this before, but it means that whenever I see it popping up on the thing, I don't make the mistake of thinking that it's going to be a bloke. I might call you Nelson next time and think that you're in Walker, but otherwise I think we're golden. Go on then. What have we got?
Why is bread exempt from having to be wrapped?
Well, lots of things are.
Well, the only thing I can think of is fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
But you can wash those. You can't wash bread. So I just wondered whether there's a long historical...
Well, it's baked on the premises, isn't it?
Not always. I've seen lorries carrying out plastic trays with the...
Have you?
Naked. Yeah.
Naked bread.
When lorries are baked at the main central bakery and then distributed to shops.
I think exempt might be a red herring.
Well, that's the word I chose. But
what else would be in that? I don't think there's anything, because you'd have to be able to say, well, how come bread is unwrapped but so and so isn't? I mean, there's nothing that would be sellable more effectively. No, this doesn't really make sense, does it? I mean, my response to you, I know, I was just not helping at all. What else? So, okay, why? I mean, it is, you wrap it yourself, don't you? You generally get a bag and put the bread in it and then put it in your trolley.
Yeah, but it's sat out on the shelves.
So why isn't bread wrapped in supermarkets? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be bread and pastries, but I think that is there some kind of exemption that...
Let's find out. Why isn't bread wrapped? Why isn't bread wrapped in supermarkets? I like that question, actually, now come to think of it. Well done. Thank you, Walker. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It's 18 minutes after 12. I'm not sure I've ever done this before, but I really want you to read Adrian Charles's column from yesterday's Guardian newspaper, especially if you've ever lost a parent. It is one of the single most beautiful examples of writing that I've ever read. It's absolutely transporting. So if you do get and it's free as well, the Guardian website, so that there's no excuse not to read it. It's on the opinion pages. It's under the headline, "I've spent a lifetime dreading the loss of a parent, and now it's finally happened." And I don't know why. I just decided to read it during the last break, partly because my friend Mick just tweeted how brilliant it is. And it is utterly, utterly beautiful. I mean, spectacularly good. And I think your life will benefit from having it in it. Sorry to change the mood slightly of Mystery Hour, but there we go. On we go. Questions still in need of answers include the one about Christian's dog and the duvet, which was a bit weird. But then Joe rang up and started talking about sperm. Thankfully, Walker saved the day and led us back into much less febrile territory with her question about bread. So the questions are, yes, admittedly naked bread, but I don't think we need to go back there. Why is bread sold unwrapped? Is it true that no egg can ever be fertilised by more than one sperm? And how can Christian's dog survive for hours under the duvet when Christian can barely last a minute? We're talking about breathing, matron. Tony's in Norwich. Tony, question or answer?
Hi, answer.
Carry on.
The two sperm question.
Oh, yes.
So rarely it happens, but when it does, the two nuclei of the sperm will cause the zygote to self-abort.
Oh. Oh, so okay. So I mean, so that's not actually any of the answers that the questioner Joe would have been considering possible. I thought it was a straight yes, no. So it can happen, but it would never go to term. It would never even sort of start developing.
Yeah. It's thought that in 1% of conceptions this happens, but on the massive majority, we're talking 99.9% of the cases, the egg will, the fertilised egg will self-abort. But sometimes it does go, and this is called a chimera.
Good Lord. And what about that notion of hardening? What was Joe's teacher talking about there?
Yeah, it's an instant process. So normally when a sperm enters the egg, you imagine that the egg is being kind of it's trying to be penetrated by a number of sperms at the same time, but
yes.
Immediately as the single head of the sperm enters through the outer membrane of the egg, there's a sort of an electrical kind of change in the nature of the cell membrane, which causes no other sperm to enter.
And there it is. And so, I mean, you've answered it brilliantly, albeit that neither Joe nor I thought that was an option. What are your qualifications, Tony?
I'm a biology teacher.
Well, that'll
and
do
have
nicely.
had that question asked on a number of times in my 30 years as a teacher.
And you served your student better than Joe's teacher served him 40 years ago, I think it's fair to say. So thank you for that as well. Round of applause for Tony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. That's 2 calls from Norwich today. I like it. Aha. We're nicking listeners from North Norfolk Digital every day. So Tony goes on that list there, and we go to John, who's in Tunbridge. John, question or answer?
Hello, James. Question.
Carry on.
My son, 8 years old, coming home from school with some very, very technical diagrammatic. Is that a word? Diagrams of whatever.
Yeah.
Internal makeup of the internal cores of the Earth.
Oh,
the
yes.
layers of the Earth.
Yes, the layers of the Earth.
Yeah, the layers. How do we know with such certainty that this is the case?
What you mean? Like they've all got different names, haven't they?
Yeah, the
So
crust, the sort of atmosphere, the core,
the mantle,
the inner core, the
outer core, inner core.
Obviously, not to scale. None of them are to scale, obviously. But how do we know with such certainty? Is my question.
Because we've never dug all the way down to the middle. You mean?
No, you're going to need a big spade or a big sort of auger to get that sort of core sample, aren't you?
Crust,
probably
mantle.
not possible, really.
There should be a song for this or something, shouldn't there? Crust, mantle, outer core, inner core.
There's probably an abbreviation or acronym to find out. But yeah, I mean, he's bringing them home.
Cumulam. Lithosphere, asthenosphere, mesosphere.
I like it.
I looked that up. You're not really supposed to do that, but I'm not looking up the answer. I'm just looking.
But it's something that I've obviously, 40 years ago, I probably may have known the answer at primary school learnings, but that's kind of gone out of my grey matter and come back in with my 8-year-old son's homework.
Love it.
So,
You're on. How on earth do they know about all the layers going right to the Earth's core? Maybe your boy's the first one to actually pick up on this, and it's all been a huge con visited upon the human species for about 150 years, like the Earl of Dartmouth.
Might be my retirement plan.
Who
knows?
We're all on it. Right, you're on.
Yeah.
How do we know what all the layers of the Earth are, given that even the mantle is about 900 degrees Celsius and as dense as semi-solid rock. So how do they get beyond that? How do we know? How do we know what is in it? What's in the Earth? 12:24 is the time. Sam is in York. Sam, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Another question from an 8-year-old, this time my daughter Grace. She'd like to know if there's a proven cure for hiccups, something she suffers from at least 3 times a day.
Oh, bless her. Really? Does she guzzle her food?
She just living the busy life of an 8-year-old, wolfing down her food and then immediately doing handstands or sprints.
Yes, so she's going to get the hiccups a little bit. Is there I don't think there is there? Because we'd know, wouldn't we? This is sort of basic dadding.
Well, she moves from various different cures, so holding her breath, getting us to make her jump, and recently she's tried sucking on a lemon, which she thinks has worked, and then isn't working any longer, so she wants a new cure.
What was the one about drinking out the wrong side of a glass? Do you remember that one?
I don't know, I've tried it with water, and I've found that helps sometimes, but...
I think, because you can't... Why would that work? Because you're getting...
I don't know, because hiccups is your diaphragm kind of spasming, isn't it? So I have no idea how any of these things would help. So I'm just hoping someone else does.
Well, we shall find out. I think it's unlikely, but, such is mystery hour that you never know for sure what is going to pop up next. So is there and I must pop Grace's name on the list as well, is there a widely accepted cure or the best possible way to alleviate hiccups? How on earth do we know what the Earth's crusts are? Why can you buy unwrapped bread in supermarkets? And how can dogs stay under duvets for ages when humans can't? I'm changing that question. I'm removing from that question the suspicion that it might only be Christian, because lots of people have had similar experiences. Here's one. Love the dog under the duvet question. My sausage dog can cook under there for hours, but I'm with the chap that called in. I can't stay under for any length of time. So they're all still in need of answers. 26 minutes after 12 is the time. Jack's in St Albans. Jack, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Jack.
So it's on the bread question.
Oh, yes.
So the ultimate answer is it's not really driven by any sort of rule. It's based on what the shop selling wants to present the product as. So you'll get some longer life products like your usual sliced white loaf bread you can get on the shelf, which will be in a plastic bag or a sort of in a usual plastic bag, which is designed for take home, sit on the counter for a week and just take a slice out every now and again. But then you get your more premium in-store bakery style product, which is supposed to look more artisanal. Therefore, you'll get them either loose or in nice paper bags to give that idea of going back to traditional bakery.
So it's psychology more than anything else.
Yeah.
So you just, if it's not wrapped up, it's a more premium product.
Yeah, and you see the same with sort of the pastries as well, which it's also about that customer base you're going for. So your loose pastries that were mentioned, people are expected to pick those up in store, walk out the front door and start eating them.
Yeah.
They don't need packaging on that. Whereas if it's something that they're expected to take home and keep for a while, you've got that bag there to either prolong the shelf, prolong the life of it, or provide ease of use for the customer.
Well, there it is. I know that's perfect sense. Qualifications?
I formerly worked in the packaging team in one of the UK's largest retailers.
Okay. So, and then this would be the kind of thing that... Tell me something I don't know about packaging. Make me surprised. Surprise me, even.
Pretty much most packaging you'll see in the supermarket is there for a good purpose. And that is, it's there for a purpose and it's not unnecessary. It has a functional reason to be there.
Yeah.
And people have a perception that a lot of it is there for the use of packaging, but it's not. It has a real use.
That'll do. Have a round of applause on me.
Okay.
Do you have any favourite packaging?
No.
What about an egg box?
I was working traditionally on the data side of packaging, so I never really got to the...
You didn't get your hands on. You're a white collar. No. You're a white collar packaging worker.
Yeah.
You didn't spend any time at the coalface. I think an egg box is a thing of beauty.
Depends if it's a plastic one or a cardboard one. You've got two very different egg boxes.
That's a very good point. I'm thinking purely of the cardboard ones, actually. Thank you, Jack. Good work. Enjoy your round of applause. It is coming up to 12:30, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It is 32 minutes after 12. Just in case you thought I was exaggerating 2 hours ago, if you were listening, I talked about a journalist who writes the most undiluted bilge imaginable. So bilge-like that you have to actually check it hasn't been generated by an AI parody. I thought I'd just check to see what he had in today's paper again. Here it is. Western civilization is being driven to oblivion by the false prophets of diversity. The woke revolutionaries reject real equality in favour of a permanent revolution against fairness and merit. And I told you that the people who have risen to prominent positions entirely through dumb luck, patronage and privilege have to insist that they are actually beneficiaries of fairness and merit. It's crazy. And that leads, of course, to attacks upon people who've fallen through the cracks or who are struggling. That they must also be consequences of fairness and merit, because the alternative is to believe that you don't deserve the high-status position that you've ended up in. Anyway, enough of such seriousness. It's interfering with Mystery Hour, which continues apace. Lee's in Dartford. Lee, question or answer?
Hello, James. I've got an answer.
Let's do it.
Hiccups.
Yeah.
Put a finger in each ear. Have someone that you trust raise the glass to your lips, and you have to drink at least half the glass full. Your hiccups are gone.
Yeah, listen,
and you're going to tear me apart, I know.
I'm not going to tear you apart. I'm just... But look at what you've done to my show. So people... What if someone's just tuned in? They think I'm doing an hour on ringing in with what's your cure for hiccups. Don't they?
But
you've got no scientific...
You
haven't got any medical basis for this at all. It's just something that you do. Everyone can ring in now. It'd be bloody John in Ongar ringing in next saying, oh, I stick a banana down my back or something like that.
Oh, that works as well.
Yeah, I'm not telling you what came up on QI. I'm not saying those words out loud on the radio. But if that's true, I think I'd rather have the hiccups.
I agree to a point, and if I was listening to this, I'd be laughing, thinking, "Oh, James is going to rip him apart," and you did, and it's great.
I haven't. But it does work.
But it does work, and the only way that you could try it is ask the gentleman to get his daughter to try it and phone you back, and I bet it works.
All right, then. So if Sam will still be listening, next time Grace gets the hiccups, and Sam can do this, because if you can't trust your dad, who can you trust? So you put a finger in each ear.
The person puts each of
the sufferer, finger in each ear.
Each ear. The dad pours the glass of water slowly up to the lips so that they can drink it at a pace that they're happy with and they can trust.
Yeah.
Okay, they drink as much as they can, the whole glass if possible, or at least half of it.
Yeah.
The hiccups will be gone. Now, my dad was, God rest his soul, the most sceptical, infuriating person for these sort of things, and he used to suffer hiccups terribly.
Good Lord.
And it worked. And he
every time.
And he wouldn't believe it. He would not believe it until it worked. And for once, he was speechless.
Well, I'm not surprised. You were pouring a glass of water down his neck. And he had his fingers in his ears as well, so he couldn't hear what he was saying.
Well,
I've already got people...
That was a reason for his death, did I? But that's another story.
I've already got people agreeing with you. There is a lot coming in saying that this is true.
And just to lightheartedly add to your comment before you graciously took me on air, the AI, this current government have had artificial intelligence for the whole of the 14 years. Just wanted to put that out there.
You've already got a round of applause. I'm going to give you a round of applause because there is no scientific.
That's what I wanted.
No, that's what you're getting. There's no scientific consensus on this, but judging by my inbox, there is a lot going on. There was a block of ice down your neck. Don't ring in now with other cures for hiccups. It's like, listen, the show goes low sometimes. I'm not going to lie to you, because you wouldn't. You know it does. There are times when we make Alan Partridge sound like Plato's Symposium, but today is not one of those days. I'm not doing a phone in. But I'll tell you what it does do. Right? There is a myth in this business that it's all about getting the phone to ring, and if you can get the phones to ring, then you're doing your job right. This is not true. This is the first thing when someone comes to produce my programme, and they might have been producing other programmes previously, the first thing that we have to talk about is the fact that making the phones ring is easy. It is not a guarantee of good radio. Here is a very good example of that. If I now said, give me a ring if you think you've got a better cure for the hiccups than old Lee in Dartford, the phones would ring off the blinking hook. And it would only be mildly amusing radio if we kept it in the realms of Mickey taking and sort of meta mockery of our own programme. As soon as it becomes a serious conversation about competing methods of curing the hiccups, all bets are off. Anyone who rings me about the hiccups after Lee got through is going to be banned from the programme forever. All right? Forever. And we can now know with AI we can do that. We can check. All right? Joe's in Mason. Joe, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Why is it that just before as aircraft are coming for landing, they turn all the lights off?
Oh, I know this. Come on. We've done this before. We must have done this before. Go on, what?
I mean, I always found it a strange curiosity, but I was sitting watching sort of air ambulance show, and they were frantically trying to save this chap's life, and the air ambulance had to turn all the lights off before it came in for landing, so they've essentially had to almost halt the life-saving treatment for just a few moments to touch down, and I'm curious. I don't know why it is.
The answer we've had in the past is to get your eyes ready for the darkness in case there's an accident. There it is. I got it. It's it. That's it. That's the answer. Oh, get in.
Okay, but the pilots are locked away in their own little room. Surely they could leave the lights on for the passengers' comfort and turn the lights off in the cockpit.
It's not just their eyes, it's your eyes. They're trying to get your eyes accustomed to the darkness in case there's an accident on landing.
Okay.
And you have to evacuate the plane in the dark. So it's getting you used to because think about it, mate. Every second is going to be precious in that context, isn't it?
Well, if it's pitch black, surely if it's pitch black, it makes it more awkward for you to get out of the plane. Surely leaving the lights on would be more...
No, the lights are going to go off as a consequence of the emergency.
Okay.
It's in the board game, this one.
Oh, okay.
That's my qualifications. So what would it go? So have you ever played the board game?
Not yet. I'm hoping to get it from my wife.
So here's what you have to do now. So there'll be a right answer and a wrong answer. I can't remember what the wrong answer is on the board game, but then you have to come up with a wrong answer of your own and try and convince everybody else playing that is actually the right answer. So what would you come up with now if we were playing the game together? Why do they turn the lights off before the plane is landing? I came up with a really good one once. I think it might be the one in the board game, but I can't remember it for the life of me. Why do they turn the lights off when you... Energy. They need the energy for the engines.
Need the energy for the landing. Yeah, I was going to say for the privacy of the passengers as they're coming down.
Also that. Yeah. Also, you don't want
trying to sneak back from weekends away that they don't want other people to find out.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want other people at the airport knowing that you've just been in Magaluf for a cheeky weekend. You're absolutely right. And I think I get a round of applause on this one.
All right, then.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. That is the answer. It's about the emergency landing and getting your eyes ready for the darkness. Crikey. Qualifications, Mystery Hour board game, available at mysteryhour.co.uk. Suzanne is in Northwich. Suzanne, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Dogs' noses. And why you can... Dogs' noses and why you can go under a...
spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, it's the nose, is it? What does it?
It's the nose, does it? Yeah.
Go on then, tell me more.
The shape of the nostril. It's, well, when you think of our nose, our nostrils go forward.
Yeah.
If you look carefully at a dog's nose, whichever breed, they go forward.
Yeah.
And there's like a split to the side.
Yeah.
On each nostril.
Right.
So we're taking air from the front. They can take air from the front and the sides. And because it's something to do with the olfactory system, and because how they sense things, they have a much wider area to take in air.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it is. It's like, I don't want to scare people, but it's like somebody's taken a knife and cut the sides of the noses. It's like, imagine each side of your nostril.
Yeah. So, except not quite like that, because it's still working as a nose. It's not just sort of flapping around.
Yeah, but it's open there.
So they're getting it in. So
side.
Yeah, so they've got more suction, as it were, when they're under the than a human.
They're taking it from different directions.
Oh, that's a lovely answer. Qualifications?
Ex-veterinary nurse.
Well, you live and learn, because I tell you what, I didn't say at the time that usually when I take the mickey out of a question, it's me that ends up looking silly, because it's become a bit of a repetitive part of the. But I have ended up looking silly. It's a really good answer, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I just ask them a question?
Not really, but you're here now.
No, it's not a question. It's a. Can you stop having a go at bulldogs, please?
I've never had a go at a bulldog in my life.
Oh, Billy Bulldog.
What?
With his avatar?
Bulldog. Well, they can't. I bet they can't stay under the duvets for very long, can they?
You've not met my dog?
I haven't met your dog, but Billy Bulldog isn't a reference to an actual dog. It's someone's name.
Billy with a bulldog avatar.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Leave the bulldogs alone. But yeah, that's the thing.
I got Doris rang in and said, stop talking about Auntie Doris's Facebook page. Keith gets the hump when I talk about Uncle Keith's Facebook page, and then you...
Can we ever go about having a go?
No, I can't say, what can I use then? I say Billy Bunch of Numbers with a
bulldog avatar.
Yeah, but what am I going to say instead? Billy Bunch of Numbers with a flag avatar, but then people will accuse me of hating the flag. It's
somebody that needs to remember to order some gammon.
It could be that gammon avatar. A gammon avatar.
A gammon avatar.
Round of applause for Susan. Has she had it yet? Suzanne, I beg your pardon. There we go.
No,
now. There it is. All right. You take care. I'll try and remember that, but I'll almost certainly forget. But you knew that already. Simon's in it. Ikaria. Kalimera. Kalispera.
Kalimera.
Kalispera. Ketsi. Kesi.
Yeah, imekala.
Ligo Simera. Ligo Kurasmeno.
Meta Suvlakis to Taverna.
Tora?
Doki, Meta, later.
Oh, Meta. Signomi.
Yeah.
Lucky you. After all these years, I should be able to say question or answer in Greek, but I can't. Question or answer?
Yeah, we need the Kanai.
No. Well, you live there. Go on, what have you got?
Yeah. Listen,
I am listening.
I'm a bit worried this might blow the lid off of Mystery Hour. My question is this, right? Is there some kind of criteria for the decision making about the colours of football shirts. Like, why? I know, for example, that Notts County play in black and white because I think Juventus lent them some shirts. And it's also similar for Arsenal with Nottingham Forest from years ago.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But doesn't that answer your question then?
No, because everybody would be lending shirts to everybody else. So
So the original allocation of colours is random and arbitrary.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Kidderminster play in red and white, right?
Yeah, although our away strip's a bit weird this season, but we are Phil Brown's red and white army. You're correct.
So why do you play in red and white? What's the reason? Why do Newcastle play in black and white stripes?
This is veering into philosophy now, though, which is appropriate enough given that you're ringing from Greece.
Well, I can tell you why Olympiacos play. Well, no, I can tell you why Olympiacos are called Gavros, which is a little fish. It's because they're based in Piraeus, in a port. But that's another story.
I was more of a Panathinaikos fan during my
me too.
Spending a lot of time in Greece. No, hang on. I need to get the question clear. So I mean, the Kidderminster Harriers was originally an athletics club, and I mean the original answer to your question is to distinguish athletes from other athletes. That's why you wear different coloured shirts.
Yeah, but for example, though, stick with me with this.
I think it was the other way round, you know. I think Notts County, because Notts County might be the oldest club in the world. I think they lent their shirts to Juventus. I think you might be right.
I knew it was one way or the other.
Yeah, no, I think it was.
But for example, why do Aston Villa and West Ham play in the same colours?
In claret and blue. This is the problem, though, Simon. I think there's several questions here, all masquerading as all as one. The fundamental answer will be because at some point in their history they chose those colours. That will be it. But then you start saying, but then you're saying, well, why did they choose those colours? And why did they choose those colours? And why did they choose those colours? And then we'll be here forever. We'll be here literally forever.
This is why I thought it might blow the lid off of mystery.
And that is the problem.
I do apologise.
So if someone can answer the question simply as to the original allocation of club colours, we'll take that call, but without any specific reference to any individual clubs whatsoever. Otherwise, we will be here literally forever.
Forever, I know,
Forever.
And that's what worried me. But I just wondered if there was some kind of criteria at some point, or I don't know.
I doubt it. I very much doubt it. But if there is someone who'll know, and hopefully they'll ring in. Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Simon. Καλό ταξίδι. It's 12:47.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:51 is the time. We've done that one. Hey, what about the Earth's crusts? We haven't done that. How we did? I've got a question about bread and a question about the Earth, and I wrote crust next to both of them. But the Earth's crust. So there's like all those layers of the Earth. How do we know? No one's been there. You can't see it. So how do we know what the Earth's layers are? 0345 606 0973. Done the aeroplane. The origin of football shirt colours. Origin of all of them. Not one of them. All of them. How come? I think it's just random and arbitrary. Apparently, the West Ham got a bunch of Villa shirts that were being taken home for washing. And Craig, are you pulling my leg on this one? I don't know whether you are or not. So we need that one. Football shirts, we've done that one. That's it, I think. The moon, the duvet, the sperm. Imagine if you've just turned this on. You're expecting highfalutin political analysis. Because that's what someone told you OBC was all about. And you've just got some bloke going, the moon, the dog and the duvet, the sperm and the bread, the earth, the hiccups. So it's just the football shirts and the earth. Gil is in Southwark. Gil, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Is it Gil or Jill?
No, it's Jill.
It's Jill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Producer told me it was Gil.
Yeah, I know.
What happened? We might have a disciplinary later. I need your evidence. She even wrote on the screen, hard G.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's a description of your sort of hobbies.
No.
Jill, in Southwark. Sorry, Jill. Where were we? Question or answer? Question or answer?
It's an answer.
Carry on.
To add to the biology teacher who phoned up. He said the 1% become a chimera that get fertilised and carry on. It's also known as a high-cadidiform mole.
Say that again. The phone line went a bit funny. No, I'm not. It sounds like I'm joking, but it really did go a bit funny. What did you say?
Okay. It's known as a high-cadidiform mole.
Right.
And it is a type of pregnancy. And the way you discover that you've had it is when you go for your scan, because you have all the normal symptoms, and you do your test and you have your pregnancy hormone. And when you go for a scan, there's no baby.
Oh, no.
And yeah, and when I had mine 41 years ago, they thought it was the baby had died.
Oh.
But once they take it away and they test it, they see that it is this type of tumour that is really, really rare.
Oh.
And there are two types, I believe, a full mole pregnancy and a partial. And some of them do require treatment after.
Right.
Because they can grow back as a cancer. So you have to be watched, monthly, have tests.
And keep an
to
eye
make
on it.
Sure. Yeah. So, and they only found out that it was caused by two sperm fertilising the egg quite recently. Because when I had mine, the hospitals didn't know. Charing Cross is the experts, Charing Cross Hospital.
Well, you live and learn.
So, yeah.
You live and learn. Well, you've already told us, so you just get a round of applause. It feels a bit inadequate, really, in the context of what you've just shared with us. But
I think children think.
No, I've got that. Do you know? I wasn't going to ask, but I'm glad you said that, Jill. I'm glad you said that. But
I've got 3 children.
That's
grown
nice.
up, grandchildren, etc.
Oh, fantastic! And now you've got a round of applause as well, so your life's complete.
It is.
Go on then.
And speaking to you is amazing. Thank you.
Well, speaking to you is amazing, Jill. Thank you. And I promise to get your name right next time, because I won't. I will have different staff working on the programme. Sam's in Hampstead. Sam, question or answer?
Yeah, hi, James. Answer.
Carry on.
So the reason we know the Earth's different layers is because of geophysics. So when there's an earthquake on one side of the planet, we can measure the different types of waves, 2 types of waves, body waves, pressure waves and surface wave and shear waves.
Yeah.
So shear waves don't travel through liquid. They can only travel through solid materials. So when they hit the liquid mantle, they stop and we can measure that. And P waves travel through both liquid and solid. As they travel through the different earth layers, they change propagation and stretch and squeeze. So we can measure that it's going from liquid into solid into the core.
I know you're right. I understood about 4% of that.
I guess the types of waves, the way they travel, it means that you can measure the difference in the stretch and squeeze of the different types of waves.
So we fire the waves into the. Do we fire the waves into the Earth?
It's mainly through. Originally, it was through Earth. So when there was an earthquake, you receive the wave on the other side of the planet.
So it's quite recent science, then. It's quite recent science.
I think it's probably early 20th century.
Yeah, that's what I mean by quite recent.
Yeah.
Qualifications?
Master's degree in geophysics and geology, and work as an exploration geologist.
Yeah. What are you looking for this week?
Nickel and lithium mainly.
Did you see that dude? Did you see that dude in Dorset who found a big gold nugget?
I did. We even talked this morning about trying to stake the land to see if we could go and find some.
To see if there was any more down there. It's an extraordinary. Was it Dorset? It was Dorset, wasn't it?
I think it was up north, Yorkshire.
Oh, was it? Oh, my
Yorkshire,
bad.
yeah.
My bad. I'm just trying. Hey, I'm just trying to put everyone else off the trail, Sam. Have a round of applause for Sam. I'm just going to check that so that people don't think I'm mad. They did find a massive. Hang on, it was on page 3 of the. Bear with. I'll be back in a sec. There it is. Shropshire Hills. A £33,000 nugget of gold in the Shropshire Hills. There, we've done. Jim's in Whitley Beer. Jim, question or answer?
Oh, it's answered, James.
Carry on, Jim.
Football shirts.
Yes.
A long time ago, when the clubs were first starting, they tended to have the Catholics and the Protestants separated within, say, one town. And the Catholics went for a red shirt. Huh? The Protestants went for a blue shirt if there was two different teams in the same town. Now, if you look at Everton and Liverpool,
yes.
If you then go to Manchester City,
in blue,
Manchester United, red.
Yep.
And the one about Juventus and the black and white stripes, it was actually a private World Cup.
I've seen the film.
Yes, well, that was Tommy Lipton.
That's the fella
who did it.
Yeah.
And he invited a small mining team from West Auckland.
That's right. It's a cracking film.
Participate.
It's just your neck of the woods. What's the film called? Can you remember?
I can't remember.
Oh.
But what happened was they played, because they followed Newcastle United, they played in black and white stripes.
That's exactly right.
And of course, they beat them. They won
the World Cup. It might be called the first World Cup or something like that.
Yes, it was.
We're going to run out of time. What are your qualifications?
My grandfather played left back for Sunderland.
Oh, flip it out, that'll do. What was his name?
Tommy Batty, but you're talking about 1912.
Yeah, there'll be someone who remembers. Tommy Bay. Left back or right back?
He was left back. I was also brought up by the widow of Jimmy Thorpe.
Good
Lord. Who was a goalkeeper killed in 1926, yeah.
Well, you've covered a lot of ground there, Jim. And you sound a little bit like James Bolam. Has anyone ever told you that before?
Well, we both come from South Tyneside.
So it's exactly the same.
The accent is different.
Neck of the woods.
It's different wherever you go, you ever come from. Yeah.
These little delicate differences and distinctions. Top man.
And the hairy biker Sai as well. Similar.
Yeah, there you're right. It's true that I'm fascinated by accents. I used to be really good. I could name little, relatively small areas that people did it. Someone to a caller from Northwich. I told her where she'd gone to school. If you missed any of today's show, well, I've got to give it to Jim now, haven't I? Jim in Whitley Beer. He gets the Mystery Hour board game. It's got a late win. I'm not going to tell you who was in the lead until then, because then it will just break their hearts. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download it now for free from your app store, or head to globalplayer.com. 4 on LBC. Lewis Goodall is standing in for Tom Sawbrick today, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 It's time for Sheila